Wait, you're my soulmate. Alien girl's soulmate indicator left her in shock. They meet in a corridor of carnage, each convinced they're about to take down an enemy agent. Blinding sparks fly from severed conduits overhead, lighting the warship's narrow hall with strobing flashes. Alarms pound through the metallic hull like a frantic heartbeat. Rail turns the corner first, breath ragged from sprinting across half the ship to intercept whoever's been sabotaging the vessel's control center. He doesn't know her yet, but he feels something different in the air. That moment is all he has before he sees her move, a lethal flash of black and green armor. He sidesteps pure instinct, feeling a shockwave rip through the air an inch from his ribcage. Her left gauntlet emits a sizzling hiss. She missed by a hair. He ducks, pivoting on the balls of his feet, fists tightening as he slams a forearm into her side. The contact is jarring, muscles meeting an unexpected hardness beneath that alien armor, but it does push her off balance. She recovers almost instantly, flipping backward in a graceful arc, silver blue hair flying like a banner of shimmering light. Her eyes burn violet for an instant, then flicker cyan, capturing him in a gaze of mingled challenge and confusion. Then she lunges again. Rail can't let himself be dazzled by the beauty. He's killed other aliens in the past, ones that looked far more monstrous, yet were just as quick and deadly. She's not the first he's faced, but somehow there's an electricity in the air he can't quite name. He grits his teeth, cracks his knuckles in a short, menacing gesture. He sees the faint, shifting glow on her forearms, like living tattoos, pulsing in rhythm with her breathing. The warship's overhead lights flicker again, plunging the corridor into half-darkness. She takes the opportunity, pivoting with fluid speed, aiming a precise strike at his throat. He barely catches her wrist. Her skin is surprisingly warm, not cold as he expected from her species. There's a split second of direct contact, and something hums between them, a spark of energy that jolts up his arm. She makes a startled hiss, part anger, part shock. Her other hand whips forward. He twists away, but not before a blow to his side knocks air from his lungs. He staggers and tries to counter, but she leaps away with predatory grace. They circle each other, panting. He notices the flicker of bright symbols across her gauntlet, each glyph lighting in sequence like a countdown. She glances at it for the briefest second. Her face contorts in total disbelief. He doesn't grasp what that device means, only that she looks rattled. He seizes the moment. Rushing forward with all the power in his broad shoulders, he slams her against the corridor wall. Her armor scrapes metal, sending a tiny spray of sparks. She snarls, more furious than frightened, but that quicksilver hair and those shifting eyes distract him for an instant. She lifts her gauntlet between them, and an ominous glow crackles, readying a blast that will fry him. His reflexes kick in. He pins her wrist to the bulkhead. Her eyes flare cyan again, and for a breath, they're nose to nose, breathing the same tight, overheated air. A tremor runs through her. Her wrist device glows with unstoppable intensity, and she stares at it with something akin to horror. He hears her voice for the first time, a low, throaty purr that vibrates through the metal corridor. "No," she hisses, as if telling the device itself to shut off. This can't be right. He has no idea what she's talking about. All he knows is that he's got an enemy pinned. His knuckles are throbbing from slamming into her armor. He readies his next move, but an explosion rocks the ship. The entire hull groans. He staggers. So does she. There's a scream of twisting metal from somewhere behind them, followed by a deafening blast that sends shockwaves through the corridor. For a second, they're both thrown off balance, forced to cling to each other to keep from being hurled across the deck. The overhead lighting flickers out entirely. The corridor plunges into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of emergency beacons and her swirling bioluminescent patterns. He can't see a thing except for those shifting lines on her bare arms. Suddenly, the hull tears somewhere close by. Air pressure shifts violently. An alarm shrieks about a hull breach and decompression. The nearest blast door groans and slams shut. They have about 10 seconds to escape before the corridor vents them into the cold void. Rail curses under his breath. He's spent too long in a standoff with this alien. She's the first to bolt. Instead of continuing their fight, she grabs his arm, shockingly strong for her lean frame, and yanks him down the corridor. The deck tilts beneath them as the warship listing grows worse. Bulkheads start crumpling. They sprint, the shrieking alarms dogging their every step. Neither of them has time to question this abrupt shift from mortal enemies to fleeing side by side. Adrenaline overrides everything. Survival is the only immediate mission. They crash around a corner to find another section of corridor caving. In sparks cascade from power lines. Smoke clouds their vision. "This way!" she snarls, her voice urgent. Rael's not in the habit of trusting random aliens. But as the corridor behind them rips open, spilling swirling debris and a fierce gale into the vacuum, he sees no other choice. They press on, racing for an intact sector. He feels the hull tremble as multiple secondary explosions tear through the warship. The floor beneath them cracks in places. They're running out of time. They turn another corner and find a bulkhead that's jammed halfway open, twisted metal edges still glowing from the heat of an earlier blast. She tries to slip through, but her gauntlet catches. Rael hears her frustrated growl, sees sparks, as she wrestles the jammed door. Impulsively, he wraps both arms around her waist, ignoring the sudden jolt of contact from her glowing skin, and yanks her through. They tumble onto the deck on the other side, panting. She lands partly on him, the plates of her armor pressing into his chest. For an instant, they lock eyes. A bolt of raw electricity seems to pass between them. She shakes it off first, rolling away with a hiss. He's up a second later, scanning the dark corridor. They can hear more explosions in the distance. He spots an escape pod hatch near the end of the flickering hallway. Several pods are missing, probably already jettisoned, but he sees one that still has a green indicator light. "There," he says, voice rough, pointing. She gives a curt nod and sprints forward. As they run, the entire ship lurches so violently that the deck plates buckle. They nearly go sprawling. Rael manages to keep his footing, but just barely. She doesn't fall either, balancing with impressive grace. In moments, they reach the hatch. She slams a palm against the console, and the thick doors slide open with a tortured grinding sound. Inside is a cramped metal cylinder. There's only room for 2, maybe 3 if they pack in tight. She climbs in first, then whips around, clearly torn between letting him follow or sealing him out. Another deafening blast rocks the warship, and she has no time to decide. He practically crashes into her, forcing the door to close behind them. The emergency system engages, sealing the pod from the corridor. He hears the hatch's mechanism hissing as it locks. Then, in the flickering overhead lighting, they stand pressed shoulder to shoulder in a space no larger than a storage closet. She eyes him warily. He breathes hard, sweat tracing lines over the dust and grime on his face. She frowns at the console, jabs alien glyphs with quick, precise taps. The pod rumbles. Rael braces for launch. Their small craft detaches with a sudden, lurching motion that throws them against the walls. Rael slams a shoulder into one side. She braces on the opposite side, a hand splayed against the metal. Then a silent quake of acceleration hits, and they feel themselves thrust forward as the pod rockets away from the doomed warship. Through the narrow viewport, Rael glimpses a swirl of stars, a battered hull fragment spinning away, and the blue glow of distant engines. Then, the warship bursts. In a spectacular chain reaction, each explosion lighting the darkness like fireworks. The shockwave rattles the escape pod. He sees her teeth clench, sees bright lines ripple under her collarbones. There's anger in her eyes. Perhaps grief, too, for the destruction of the vessel she was on. But she quickly hides it. He realizes he's staring, maybe lingering a moment too long on the curve of her armor or the way her silver hair clings to her neck. She whips around with a glare and he looks away, jaw set in defiance. He doesn't trust her. She doesn't trust him. Yet here they are, thrown together in an escape pod hurtling toward a planet below. A jolting vibration floods the small space as the pod enters the planet's atmosphere. She barks a command in her language, and the console blasts a string of shrill beeps. Outside, the atmospheric friction turns their viewport a blazing orange. He wonders if they'll survive the descent. He's been on countless infiltration missions, but never quite like this. As they break through cloud cover, the pod's stabilizers attempt to engage. He's seen plenty of crash landings, so the precarious lurch that tosses them around is nothing new. He braces himself, hooking an arm through a handhold. She does the same, the fierce glow of the console illuminating her features. He's never been this close to an alien soldier who was so electric. The word pulses in his mind, describing the aura he feels from her, the tension that crackles whenever they lock eyes. But he can't waste time unraveling that. They're seconds from a crash. Impact hits, a bone-jarring slam that makes the hull groan. The small craft screeches across rocky terrain, scraping deep furrows in the ground before coming to a shuddering halt. Smoke and steam billow from the battered engines, Rail's ears ring. He's momentarily dazed. She curses under her breath in a language he doesn't fully understand. Then the emergency lights kick in, bathing the cramped interior in harsh red. He unbuckles a harness he only half remembered fastening. She does the same, rubbing her shoulder. Her armor is scuffed and dented from the crash. His vest has a tear near the side. Both are battered, but alive. He motions to the hatch release. She nods, steps carefully around him. Their movements are awkward in the tiny pod, forced to brush against each other in passing. He can't help but notice how her glowing tattoos brighten whenever her body presses close. She tries not to react. The device on her wrist, whatever it is, still emits a faint hum. She looks at it warily before pressing another glyph that triggers the hatch. A loud hiss escapes as the door cracks open. Warm, humid air floods the pod. Outside is a rocky forest floor dotted with glowing fungal clusters, their faint bioluminescence reflecting in the hazy turquoise moonlight overhead. She steps out first, scanning the perimeter. He follows, scanning in the opposite direction. They're in an alien wilderness, though the presence of luminescent flora suggests it might be her home territory, or at least a planet more welcoming to her species than his. He tries to keep his guard up. She lifts her gauntlet, tapping a few controls, presumably to read local atmospheric conditions. She glances at him, and her lips form a tight line. Then she extends her gauntlet again. A small, flickering hologram appears, some sort of scanning readout. He can't read the alien script, but he catches a glimpse of the universal symbol for oxygen. She gives a terse nod. They won't suffocate. He figures they're not about to kill each other in this moment. There's a grudging truce. She kneels to examine the ground, pressing a hand into the damp dirt. Her bioluminescent skin flares in reaction to the living soil. She looks alarmed by something, perhaps that she's forced to rely on him. The tension in her posture says she's not happy about their predicament. They're stranded in unknown territory with no backup, no idea who survived that warship explosion, and no clue if friendlies or hostiles inhabit this region. He's been in worse. But the memory of that furious fight in the corridor, culminating in an unexpected alliance, sparks in his mind. He tries to push it aside. They lock eyes again. This time there's no direct violence. Instead, a question forms unspoken in the air. She points at him, then at her wrist device, and utters something in her language. He can't decipher the words exactly, but the questioning tone is unmistakable. She's demanding to know why it registered him, why it lit up when they clashed. He shrugs, shaking his head. No idea what that thing is, he says. She exhales a hiss of frustration, tries again. He repeats that he doesn't know. Finally, with a short, reluctant breath, she flicks a switch on her gauntlet. He hears a faint whine, like a translator function warming up. She speaks again, this time in broken but understandable basic. Soul bond indicator, it found you, impossible. He stares at her in confusion. Soul bond? That's not a concept he's familiar with. He's heard rumors of certain alien races that can detect their fated partners, but it's always been dismissed as myth or superstition. He looks at her face, reads the shock and revulsion there. She's not lying. She hates what's happening, just as much as he can sense her fear. This revelation is apparently catastrophic for her, and it's definitely not on his agenda to get roped into some alien mating ceremony. He rubs the scar on his cheek, feeling the old memory of betrayal flare in his mind. We have bigger problems, he growls, pointing to the smoky wreck behind them. We're stranded. We don't know if there are hostiles nearby. We need to find shelter. She scowls at his words but doesn't disagree. Her wrist device flickers again, showing partial coordinates for some outpost or settlement. She tries to enlarge the map, but it crackles with static, probably damaged in the crash. Still, she gestures vaguely north, indicating that direction might lead to civilization. He has no better plan, so he nods. They start walking. The forest is alive with unnerving noises, screeches of distant creatures, rustling leaves that glow in stripes of neon green. The ground is littered with spongy plant growth, each step sinking slightly. She leads the way, scanning the surroundings, with a predator's caution. He follows, staying behind, just enough to watch her movements. He can see fresh dents in her gauntlet from their earlier battle. She keeps glancing at it as though it betrayed her. Maybe it did. She's clearly upset. Her very existence seems to revolve around discipline and order, now that Device has thrown her into chaos by marking him as something important. They move quickly, aware that the region might be teeming, with more than just wildlife. Their species have been at war for months, maybe longer. Official lines are blurred. Rail used to serve in an elite human unit, but after they were betrayed by higher-ups who made a secret deal with an alien faction, he's been on his own. He has no loyalty to the official channels. He only has loyalty to the few memories of his fallen squad. Even so, forging an alliance with one of them is borderline insanity, especially when this soul bond nonsense threatens to complicate everything. He tries to ignore the way his heart pounds whenever her glowing skin catches his eye. They tread carefully through thick roots, winding vines, and phosphorescent mushrooms the size of small trees. The planet's moonlight and the faint luminescence of the flora give them enough visibility. More than once, they halt at the sound of snapping branches. She raises a hand for silence, scanning the area with ears that must be more sensitive than his. The flicker of an animal's eyes glows in the shadows, but it slips away before revealing itself. Each near encounter draws them closer, forces them to rely on each other's skills. At one point, a cluster of spore pods detonate unexpectedly, releasing a cloud of shimmering dust. She seizes his hand and yanks him behind a fallen log. Her glyphs flare as she holds her breath. He imitates her, resisting the urge to cough. The dust drifts away harmlessly. She gestures for them to keep moving. He feels the echo of her warmth on his palm, where she gripped him. Sometime later, they crest a small rise. The terrain opens up, revealing a drop-off that overlooks a wide, mist-shrouded valley. Far in the distance, the silhouette of battered structures stands against the horizon. Ruined towers, possibly an abandoned settlement. She frowns, studying the valley. He recognizes the unsettled tension in her posture. Neither of them knows who occupies that place. Could be friend or foe, or worse, it could be overrun by something else entirely. They have little choice. The warship is gone, they have no communications, and they need resources. They begin their descent, picking a path among boulders and thick, twisted trees. The slope is steep, forcing them to support each other if they slip. Their breath catches as the ground crumbles beneath their boots. At one point, she nearly tumbles, and he grabs her around the waist to steady her. She stiffens at the contact, eyes narrowing. He retracts his arm immediately, but the impression of her lean form lingers in his senses. They exchange a tense look, no words needed. They keep going. Hours pass in grim silence, marked only by the alien calls of nocturnal creatures. At last, the crumbling remains of a settlement loom ahead, half buried in vines and fungal growth. Broken walls, cracked statues, and scattered debris speak of a once thriving colony. Now it's a ghost town. The architecture is partially reminiscent of her species, smooth, flowing lines etched into the walls, doorways shaped in a style he's seen in tactical briefings on alien strongholds. But it's old, maybe centuries. She examines a broken symbol carved into a stone panel, recognition flickering across her features. Then she closes off her expression again, letting no emotion show. They move among the ruins, scanning for shelter. Eventually, they find a partially intact building with enough roof to keep out the elements. Its interior is dusty, littered, with collapsed rafters and rusting alien furniture. She checks for power sources, finds none. He rummages through the rubble, searching for anything that might function as a tool or weapon. He locates a battered crate. Inside is a coil of rope, corroded but maybe usable, and a canister of what looks like dried food. She touches the label. On the canister, reads something in her language. Her expression suggests it's extremely old, possibly not safe. She sets it aside. Exhaustion is catching up with both of them. She slides down against a wall, breathing heavily. The faint glow of her skin has dimmed, likely a sign of fatigue or lack of nutrition. He sits on the opposite side, watching her. They're separated by a few meters of dusty floor, not speaking. The battered building creaks around them. But it's stable enough for the night. He wonders if they'll both just drift off into uneasy sleep. Instead, she looks at him, scanning his face, his torn vest, the numerous scars on his arms. After a long pause, she finally speaks in her halting basic. "Your name?" He studies her warily but decides giving his name is a small concession. "Rael." She nods once. A few more seconds of silence pass. Her gaze drops to her gauntlet. It glows softly, the same device that lit up back on the warship. She purses her lips in frustration. "Sarika!" she says finally, tapping her own chest. He acknowledges her introduction with a single nod. Then they lapse into silence again. Exhaustion drags at their bodies, and for the moment, that's all the conversation they manage. In the quiet, the memory of their brutal fight and the bizarre resonance from her device swirl through his mind. He wants to ask 1,000 questions, but his eyes grow heavy. When he wakes, the interior is bathed in a dim, bluish pre-dawn light filtering through the collapsed roof. A layer of mist hangs in the air. Sarika is already up, crouching near the building's entrance, scanning outside. He rubs his stiff neck and stands, rolling his shoulders to loosen them. She beckons him over. He sees a figure in the distance, among the ruins, moving slowly. Too far to identify, another survivor from the crash or a local inhabitant. They exchange a tense look, then slip out, making sure to stay in the cover of half walls. The figure seems to be looking for salvage. It moves from one broken structure to another, rummaging. They creep closer. Behind a section of collapsed archway, they hide, peering over a tumble of stones. The figure is humanoid but taller, with elongated limbs. It wears ragged armor. Sarika stiffens as if recognizing the style. She mutters a single word that Rael doesn't catch. He sees that her hands clench into fists. If he had to guess, the newcomer belongs to some rival faction of her species, or perhaps an allied race she despises. She signals to him that they should avoid conflict if possible, but he can see the tension in her jaw, the readiness to pounce at any sign of threat. Then the figure notices movement. It swivels its head in their direction, spines along its helmet glinting. An abrupt bark in an alien tongue echoes through the ruins. Sarika responds with something equally sharp. The figure stands still, as though assessing them. Rael keeps his stance wide, prepared to fight. He quietly cracks his knuckles, adrenaline spiking. The figure's only response is to reach for a sidearm. That's all the provocation Rael needs. He leaps over the rubble and sprints forward. Sarika is right beside him, a blur of glowing patterns. The figure fires, a sizzling green bolt that scorches the ground near Rael's foot. He dives behind a toppled pillar. Sarika springs onto a broken ledge, launching from above. She brings her gauntlet around in a downward strike that glows bright. The figure barely manages to twist aside, crashing into the dusty floor. Rael leaps up, lunges in for a follow-up, but the figure recovers with surprising agility. It hisses in her language, something about traitors. She spits an insult back. The fight that follows is furious and direct. The figure's weapon blasts chunks of stone, each time Rael dodges behind cover. Sarika darts in and out, using her speed to keep it off balance, while Rael tries to flank. They move like a coordinated team, though they've barely known each other a day. At one point, the figure pins Sarika's arm, nearly forcing her gauntlet to fire into the ground. Rael tackles it from behind, wrestling its weapon away. They roll over the debris. The figure claws at him with surprising strength. Sarika seizes the opening to land a savage blow to the back of its head with her armored elbow. A bright flash of her gauntlet energies bursts. The enemy collapses, twitching from the impact. Panting, both of them stand there staring at the downed foe. Sarika takes a moment to catch her breath, eyes flickering from violet to cyan, then back to violet. A mixture of battle lust and disgust lines her features. She looks at the figure's armor, sees insignias that confirm her suspicion. She mutters a curse. Rael picks up the sidearm, inspects it. Old tech, partially corroded, probably salvaged from the same ruin. He discards it, focusing on Sarika. She stares at the unconscious foe, then kneels. With a swift movement, she removes a data chip from the armor's chest plate. She holds it up, brow furrowed in concentration. Rael knows better than to ask too many questions. The battered soldier might have information about local factions or the larger conflict. Sarika stands, slides the chip into a small slot in her gauntlet. A flicker of alien script scrolls by, some partial data about a hidden fort or supply cache. Her face remains impassive. She jerks her head, indicating they should move on. Rael nods. He follows, leaving the fallen figure still breathing but thoroughly incapacitated. They don't have the resources or inclination to drag a prisoner around. Their journey continues through the crumbling ruins. Tension hums between them, but so does a growing sense of unspoken partnership. Each time they encounter potential threats, they handle them with a brutal efficiency that belies their short acquaintance. After a few hours of weaving through collapsed buildings and subterranean tunnels, they reach a vantage point that overlooks a wide courtyard. At the far side stands a large, partially intact structure. The architecture is more advanced than the rest, featuring curved walls and a dome. Sarika's scanning device indicates a power source within. They exchange a look. This could be their chance to find food, supplies, maybe communications. They slip around the perimeter, scaling half-broken walls. Rael is impressed by her agility, though he won't admit it. She scales vertical surfaces with minimal effort, planting her feet and hands with flawless grace. He keeps up, using his strength to vault over barriers. Soon, they're perched on a ledge overlooking the Yamps in building's interior courtyard. They see 3 figures this time, all wearing the same ragged insignias. It appears to be a squad, armed and on alert. They've set up a makeshift camp near a shattered statue, crates and gear scattered around. If there's a working power source inside the building, these soldiers likely know how to access it. Sarika silently points out vantage positions. He nods, comprehending her plan without words. She'll create a distraction from the left, forcing them to regroup while he swoops in from the right. Quick, efficient, no wasted time. They share a curt nod and she moves out. He waits, tense, scanning the courtyard. After a long moment, she vaults from her hiding place, launching a bolt of crackling energy from her gauntlet. It strikes one, soldier head-on, hurling them into a row of crates. The other 2 shout and scramble for cover, returning fire. Rael sees his opening. He charges along the ledge, leaps down behind them, and unleashes a burst of close-quarters violence. Fists and elbows connect. He cracks knuckles against one soldier's jaw, sending them reeling. The other tries to spin and shoot him point-blank, but he ducks, pivots, and slams the soldier's weapon aside. A sizzling bolt scorches the air an inch from Rael's face. He doesn't flinch, just crushes the soldier's hand in a quick, brutal motion, forcing them to drop the weapon. Sarika leaps in, delivering a swift kick to the soldier's ribs that floors them. All 3 threats lie groaning in the dust. Sarika spares them no pity, stepping over bodies as she scans for more. Rael rummages through the crates, turning up battered rations, a few canisters of what looks like medical gel, and some spare energy cells. He tosses Sarika one of the cells. She checks it, nods. She then focuses on a console embedded in the building's outer wall. The display flickers, half broken. She tries several commands. Nothing. The system sparks, fizzles out. She curses softly. Rael looks over at the battered door leading inside. Maybe the main controls are in there. They bust open the door, stepping into a dim corridor lit only by emergency sconces that flicker with ancient energy. The walls are engraved with swirling patterns. Sarika traces a hand over them, her glowing fingertips casting dancing shadows. She glances back at Rael, eyes betraying a flicker of emotion, nostalgia, regret, or something else. He doesn't pry. They press deeper into the structure, passing through empty hallways that echo with their footsteps. Occasionally they see signs of life. Footprints in the dust. Scuff marks from crates being dragged. Someone's using this place as a hideout. Before long, they reach a large circular chamber. At the center stands a pedestal humming with faint power. Sarika's gaze locks on it. She moves forward. Rael stands guard, scanning the balconies overhead for any sign of snipers. The pedestal has a slot that might fit the data chip she retrieved earlier. She slides it in, her gauntlet interface glowing. Symbols flicker around the pedestal in a ring of holographic script. She manipulates them with swift, precise motions, face tight with concentration. Then, abruptly, the lights intensify. Machinery whirs to life in the walls. A faint hum resonates through the floor. Rael hisses a warning as more footsteps echo from a nearby corridor. Sarika glances at him, then back at the pedestal, torn between finishing the process or preparing for combat. "Do it," he mutters, stepping away to intercept whoever's coming. She continues her work. He plants himself at the corridor's entrance, scanning the gloom. 3 more soldiers appear, alerted by the power surge. They freeze at the sight of him, then raise rifles. He charges. They fire, but their aim is rushed. He throws himself into a slide, feeling the heat of energy bolts passing overhead. Reaching them, he surges up with an uppercut that jolts one soldier off their feet. The second tries to club him with a rifle stock. He counters, grabbing the weapon, slamming it sideways into the soldier's temple. The third soldier manages to get a shot off that grazes Rael's shoulder. A flare of pain ignites, but he grits his teeth, ignoring the burn as he lunges, cracking a fist across the soldier's jaw. They collapse. He staggers a bit, pressing a hand to the wound. His fingers come away slick with blood. Sarika sees him falter, eyes narrowing with concern. She finishes whatever she's doing with the pedestal, then rushes to his side. She glances at the burn, glow patterns flickering across her cheeks. He's about to wave her off when she unclips a small container from her belt. She opens it, revealing a thick, iridescent salve. Carefully, she smears some around the wound. It stings like fire, but within seconds, the pain fades to a dull throb. He exhales in relief. They both hear a metallic grinding sound. The pedestal's base retracts, revealing an access tunnel leading downward. She glances at him. He nods, ignoring his battered shoulder. They descend, stepping onto a spiral ramp that leads into the bowels of the structure. Dim lights flicker awake, guiding them. The air grows cooler, musty with disuse. At the bottom, they enter a wide chamber lined with humming consoles and large, cylindrical tubes. A faint glow emanates from these tubes, partially lighting the space. Sarika's eyes widen. She crosses to one console, reading the display. Rael stands behind her, tense. She speaks in a hushed tone. This was a research station, ancient, but might have weapons or something else. He sees the data streams crossing her gauntlet, flashing all manner of alien text. She stiffens. There's a device, coordinates for a hidden cache. She looks at him sharply. High value. Possibly what those soldiers wanted. He understands the significance. If the device is powerful enough, it could shift the balance of the ongoing war. Allies or enemies would kill for it. The question is, do they want it for themselves? He's not sure. He glances at Sarika, who stares at the console with conflicting emotions. Loyalty to her people wars with the reality that her own species might cast her out for bonding with a human. She tries to hide it, but the flicker of color in her eyes betrays her turmoil. The console suddenly blares a shrill alarm. She curses, pressing keys rapidly. Then the entire chamber goes red with an emergency light. Something about the system is triggering a security protocol. A pair of heavy doors slam shut behind them. Another set of doors across the chamber opens. 4 Guardian drones roll in, each bristling with weaponry. Rael and Sarika exchange a quick glance, then scramble behind a console as the drones begin firing. Energy bolts scorch the air. The hum of their servo motors is relentless. Rael risks a peek, seeing the drones' formation. 2 center, 2 flanking. He signals to Sarika. She nods. He tosses a chunk of debris across the chamber to draw their fire. The drones pivot instantly, blasting the moving object. That's when Sarika leaps from cover, launching a concentrated pulse from her gauntlet into the nearest drone. It staggers back, plating crackling. She slides behind another console for cover. Rail charges the flank, hooking a battered metal rod from the floor. He uses it like a spear, jamming it into a gap in the second drone's rotating turret. Sparks fly as the machine tries to free itself. He ducks behind it as the other drones open fire, inadvertently hitting their own ally. The second drone explodes. Sarika flips over a console, delivering a flurry of energy bolts that slice through the air. She nails a third drone, its chassis sizzling as it collapses. The last drone whips around, targeting her. Rail dives in, slamming the metal rod into its sensor cluster. It whirs, trying to pivot, but Sarika seizes the opportunity to blast it at point-blank range. It crumples, smoking. The entire skirmish ends in a swirl of heat and acrid smoke. They pant, adrenaline thundering in their veins. Then the console's alarm abruptly stops. The red lights return to a normal glow. It's as if the system recognized their success in neutralizing the security threat. Sarika examines the shattered drones, her alien eyes reflecting the flickering sparks. Rael checks his shoulder wound, making sure the short fight didn't reopen it. Their gazes meet in the aftermath. The chamber feels strangely silent after all that violence. The hum of the hidden machinery returns. She returns to the main console, ignoring the carnage. He moves to stand beside her, scanning the alien readouts. She frowns. "Coordinates to the device! We need to retrieve it, or someone else will." There's a gravity in her tone that suggests this device is more than a mere weapon. It might be a game-changer for the entire war. He exhales, nods. He has no illusions about trusting her fully, but for now, their goals align. She notices his hesitation. Her voice softens slightly. "I don't want it falling into the wrong hands. Your people, my people. We aren't the only ones fighting." He knows enough to realize the galaxy is full of factions, warlords, and opportunists. A powerful technology left behind by an ancient civilization could tip the scales, or annihilate entire planets. He rakes a hand through his sweat-damp air. "Then let's move." They gather what they can from the research station. A few intact energy cells, an old but serviceable medical kit, a data spike for hacking locked systems. Neither mentions their distrust. A fragile partnership forms in the shared objective of securing that device. Still, the tension remains, especially whenever she glances at that damn wrist indicator. It glows faintly. Sometimes she tries to hide it from him, but he notices. He's not sure if he's flattered or alarmed that this deadly alien sees him as some sort of fated mate. The entire concept feels surreal. Emerging from the station, they find the courtyard silent. The unconscious soldiers are gone, presumably dragged away by allies or retreated. Night is approaching again, long shadows stretching over the ruins. They decide to rest a bit before heading out for the next destination. They find a relatively secure room with only one entrance, so they can defend it easily. Rael volunteers to take the first watch. Sarika nods, though she seems reluctant to let her guard down around him. She eventually closes her eyes, leaning against a crumbling wall. Her armor's edges catch the moonlight, her chest rising and falling in a restless sleep. He stands near the doorway, scanning the darkness. His thoughts drift. He can't deny there's a strange pull toward her. Normally, he'd never let an alien anywhere near his back. Yet here he is, working side by side, trusting her enough to protect him. More than that, he feels an undercurrent of heat whenever they lock eyes in a fight. Something about their synergy in combat, the way their bodies move in tandem, it stirs an unsettling desire deep in his gut. He tries to ignore it, reminding himself that she's an enemy soldier under normal circumstances. But that logic doesn't stop the pounding in his chest. Hours later, they switch places. She stands guard, scanning the night with her uncanny senses. He dozes fitfully, half in and out of dreams of the warship explosion, her glowing hair, the device's weird hum. When morning comes, or what passes for morning under the planet's purple sky, they depart the ruins with new resolve. They have coordinates leading them north into mountainous terrain that the data references as the probable location of the artifact. The journey is fraught. They face quicksand-like bogs, venomous wildlife, and the lingering presence of enemy patrols. But each challenge only forges a sharper connection between them. They learn each other's rhythms, covering weak spots in fights, communicating with minimal words. The friction remains, a friction that manifests not just in arguments, but in the electric tension whenever they're forced into close quarters. She tries to treat him like an untrustworthy necessity, but her body language betrays moments of concern, especially when he gets wounded or nearly tumbles off a steep ravine. Edge. They set up camp one evening in a shallow cave partway up a rocky slope. Acidic rain pelts the world outside, hissing against the stone. Their minimal rations are shared in silence. The stench of wet rock and ozone from lightning storms saturates the air. They sit near each other to conserve warmth, not quite touching. At one point, a sudden thunderclap makes her jump. He notices, raising a brow. She scowls, as if annoyed at herself for showing vulnerability. He can't help a quiet remark. "Aren't you supposed to be the fearless alien warrior?" She shoots him a glare, eyes sparking cayenne. "I was taught to be wary of the unknown. This storm is not of my world," she retorts. Her voice is still laced with that hypnotic purr. He shrugs, deciding to keep his mouth shut. The closeness, the shared heat in the cramped cave. It all pushes that dangerous awareness to the surface. His eyes linger too long on her parted lips, the graceful lines of her neck. She senses it. Her skin's luminescence flickers. It's as if her body is giving away secrets she doesn't want to share. Another roll of thunder, closer this time, rattles the cave. Water drips in rivulets from the entrance, forming shallow pools near their feet. Sarika sighs, rummaging for the medkit. Her side took a bruise earlier when a rogue creature charged them. She touches the sore spot, wincing slightly. He extends, a hand for the kit, a silent offer. She hesitates, then hands it over. He kneels beside her, carefully pressing the salve into the bruise on her rib cage. Her armor is partially removed there, revealing the pearlescent shimmer of her skin. He tries to remain detached, focusing on the injury. But the heat of her body, the subtle patterns shifting under his fingertips, churn an undeniable tension in his gut. Her breath catches. He feels her muscles tighten, as if fighting an instinct to pull away or maybe to move closer. The moment stretches. The cave glows intermittently with the flicker of her bioluminescent reaction. He finishes applying the salve and starts to move back. Her hand darts out, catching his wrist, their eyes lock. A silent question hangs in the air, overshadowed by the storm raging outside. He sees the conflict in her gaze, duty warring with raw desire, hatred of his kind colliding with an inexplicable pull. He can't pretend he's unaffected. In the sudden quiet between thunderclaps, they lean in. It starts as a tentative brush of lips, a testing of boundaries. Then it implodes into fervor, an unleashing of tensions that have simmered since that first violent clash. Her mouth claims his with a fierce urgency, that alien purr resonating at the back of her throat. He returns the kiss with equal intensity, his hands sliding to her waist. A wave of heat washes through him, his heart slams in his chest. Her luminescent markings flare brilliantly, lighting the cave walls in dancing patterns. Each press of their bodies deepens the connection, bridging the gulf of species and war. Armor plates shift. His fingers trace the lines of her glowing tattoos, feeling them pulse beneath his touch, as if reacting to him alone. She grips his shoulders, nails digging in slightly, urging him closer. His vest is half undone, exposing the scars on his torso. She runs her palms across them, as though curious about his past wounds, the stories etched in his flesh. The cave resonates with the sound of harsh breathing and the rhythmic thrum of the rain. There's no space for caution now. They've both been living on the edge, in constant danger, uncertain of survival. This moment is the only certainty. He presses her back against the cave wall, teeth grazing her lower lip. She exhales a moan that vibrates with that unique alien undertone, sending shivers through him. It's a clash of hunger and defiance. Neither wants to yield, but both need to. She tugs at his belt. He slides hands beneath her armor, and for a time, There's nothing but raw, desperate union. The storm rages louder, lightning illuminating the darkness in flashes. Each flash reveals the primal intensity in their eyes, the sweat on their skin. She arches against him, letting out a gasping whisper of his name. His heart feels like it could explode. When they finally break apart, their breaths come in ragged pulses, bodies trembling from the force of it. The alien glow slowly dims, fading to gentle pulses along her arms and collarbone. Her eyes meet his, still flashing with aftershocks of heat. For a moment, they say nothing, only share the stunned realization that this was inevitable, and yet insane. Their species are locked in conflict, but in this battered cave, they found a singular moment of truth. She shifts slightly, untangling from him, but keeps one hand on his chest as if unwilling to sever contact. No tender confessions follow. Their world is too harsh for that. Instead, she simply rests her forehead against his for a moment, a fleeting gesture of closeness. Then, as if snapping back to reality, she withdraws, pulling her armor back into place. He drags a palm over his face, trying to steady his breathing. The storm outside continues. They exchange a long glance, acknowledging that something irreversible has taken place. Neither tries to apologize or excuse it. It simply is. They sleep, in shifts again, but the mood in the cave is charged. Whenever their eyes meet, they remember the feel of each other's hands, the press of skin. In the morning, the rain tapers off. They pack up, continuing their mission with a renewed but unspoken bond. Now, their synergy in battle is sharpened by something more personal. Each time they move in tandem, it's as though their bodies recall that intimate dance, fueling their combined prowess. She catches him staring once, and her mouth quirks in a half-smile. She quickly banishes it, but the warmth lingers. They press on toward the coordinates. The terrain grows rugged, twisting into steep crags and narrow passes. Remnants of a past civilization appear here and there. Collapsed gates, shattered, pillars carved with ancient runes, rusted watchtowers leaning precariously on cliff edges. Tension thrums through the air, as if the land itself warns them of a great power hidden nearby. She consults her gauntlet. The distance shrinks. They climb rocky outcroppings, sliding occasionally on loose scree. He offers a hand to help her up a particularly steep ledge. She glances at him, a guarded look, but takes the hand. A small jolt passes through them at the contact. They press on. Finally, they come upon a hidden canyon flanked by towering stone walls. A waterfall cascades at the far end, feeding a deep pool that overflows into a mossy river. The coordinates lead them behind that waterfall. They navigate the slippery rocks, fighting the thunderous roar of water. Eventually, they find a carved tunnel, sealed off by an ancient door. Alien glyphs, similar to those in the research station, adorn it. Sarika steps forward, placing her palm against the scanner. It flickers, then denies access. She frowns, slipping the data chip into a small port. A swirl of lights. The door remains locked. She curses softly. He stands guard, scanning the canyon for potential ambushes. With a determined glare, she tries, again, pressing a sequence of glyphs on her gauntlet. The door's console crackles, partially lighting. She types quickly, words in her language slipping past her lips in frustration. Finally, there's a mechanical groan. The door starts sliding open in slow increments. A gust of stale air escapes, carrying dust motes that shimmer in the water-filtered sunlight. They exchange a tense look and step inside. The corridor beyond is dark, lit only by the faint glow of Sarika's arm patterns and his small, tactical flashlight. Ancient sculptures of unknown beings line the walls, their faces lost to time. The air is heavy with the scent of earth and old metal. They proceed, carefully, adrenaline coursing. If the device is here, it's likely guarded by more than just locked doors. Sure enough, after a short walk, they enter a massive chamber with a vaulted ceiling. A large dais stands at the center, upon which rests a curious, spherical machine. Strange etchings cover its surface, pulsating in patterns reminiscent of Sarika's own luminescent tattoos. The sphere hovers a foot off the pedestal, humming with latent energy. Sarika stares, mesmerized. Rael moves closer, scanning for traps. The device looks ancient, yet somehow alive. Before they can investigate, a sound from behind them draws their attention. A squad of heavily armed soldiers files in, weapons leveled. They wear advanced armor that neither Sarika nor Rael recognizes. Their insignia belongs to a faction rumored to thrive on stolen technology. The leader steps forward, face hidden behind a visor. "Thank you for unlocking the vault," a distorted voice declares. "We'll take it from here." Rael and Sarika exchange a glare, cursing under their breaths. They scramble for cover behind a massive pillar. Bolts of energy slice through the air, ricocheting off ancient stone. The new arrivals came prepared, half a dozen strong, each one moving with militaristic precision. Rael grits his teeth. This is exactly the sort of scenario that has dogged him for years. Powerful opportunists swooping in at the last moment to seize a planet-killing artifact or galaxy-shifting power. Sarika ducks as a volley of plasma scorches the pillar. She whips around, returning fire with her gauntlet, but the enemy's shields absorb much of it. She curses again. He motions that they need to flank. She nods. They split up, darting between ancient statues and fallen rubble. The soldiers spread out to corner them. Rael lunges out from behind a statue, unloading with a scavenged rifle. The bullets ping off an energy shield. One soldier lurches slightly, shield flickering. He keeps up the pressure, forcing them to back behind a wall. Sarika seizes that moment to strike from the opposite side. She slides into position, blasts a soldier at close range. The shield can't handle that direct energy overload. The soldier goes down. Another soldier fires a retaliatory bolt that slams into Sarika's torso. She groans, knocked off her feet. The glow of her patterns flares in pain. Rael sees red. He roars, unloading a barrage of bullets at the soldier who hit her, enough to shatter their shield. Then he tosses the rifle aside and charges in close, tackling the enemy. They tumble across the floor, grappling. The soldier tries to bring a sidearm around, but Rael smashes their helmet with a savage elbow strike. The soldier goes limp. He scrambles up, scanning for Sarika. She's on one knee, pressing a hand to the burn on her side, eyes blazing with anger. Two more soldiers corner her. She slides backward, launching a quick burst of gauntlet energy. One soldier deflects it with an advanced shield. They converge, weapons raised. She's pinned. A final soldier is grabbing for the floating sphere, hooking a device onto it to disrupt the hover field. The artifact wobbles, its humming intensifying. Rael slams into the soldier from behind, hooking an arm around their neck and wrenching them away from the artifact. The soldier thrashes, but Rael's strength prevails. He disarms them, slamming their body to the ground. The artifact pulses, ominously, flickering with surges of light. Something about the forced removal attempt has destabilized it. Sarika lets out a defiant cry, swirling around one of her opponents, hooking an arm around their rifle and redirecting the muzzle. Into the other soldier's chest. The energy bolt that discharges throws that second soldier backward. She then spins, delivering a finishing strike to the first soldier. Rael intercepts the last foe, who attempts to tackle Sarika from behind. He lands a punishing blow to the soldier's midsection, hearing the crunch of armor. The soldier collapses, gasping. Silence falls. The dust settles. 6 soldiers lie inert on the chamber floor. They hurry to the artifact, which continues to flicker uncontrollably. Sarika's gauntlet reads a buildup of energy. It's going critical. If it overloads, it could devastate the area, maybe more. Rael's heart pounds. She gestures to a series of alien glyphs rotating around the sphere. We have to stabilize it or destroy it if we can't. He's no scientist, but he can hold the artifact steady if she thinks it'll help. She carefully approaches, eyes scanning for the right sequence to calm it. Her palm hovers near the sphere, glowing patterns swirling in response to the artifact's energy. It's responding to my biosignature. I can interface, but I need focus. He stands guard while she crouches near the console that once housed the sphere. She tries plugging her gauntlet in, matching frequencies. The artifact flares, bright enough to fill the chamber. Sparks dance around the dais. She flinches, forging a connection with the ancient technology. Her entire body glows, lines rippling over her arms, cheeks, and collarbones. Rael can almost hear her heartbeat. It resonates in the chamber like a distant drum. He steps closer, bracing her shoulder gently. "Focus," he murmurs, not sure if she can hear him. She exhales, purring frequency trembling with tension. Her eyes flutter, shifting from violet to a near-electric blue. The artifact's hum reaches a fever pitch. Then, in a blinding flash, it stabilizes. The swirling glyphs settle into a calmer pattern. She gasps, blinking rapidly as her bioluminescence then dims. "It's stable, for now, but it's bound to me." Her voice trembles with the weight of it. He helps her stand. She leans on him momentarily. The artifact floats serenely once more, apparently pacified by her touch. She withdraws, letting out a shaky breath. "We can't leave this here. Others will come," she says. Rael nods. "Then we destroy it or secure it somewhere safe." Her eyes narrow with conflict. "My people might want to study it, but it's too risky. We have to ensure no one can exploit it." He scans the battered soldiers, the wreckage around, them, and the raw power humming from the artifact. The prospect of any faction harnessing it terrifies him. "Is there a fail-safe?" he asks. She checks the console, scrolling through ancient data. "Yes, but it'll cause a massive energy release. We might not survive if we don't evacuate quickly." They don't have time for second-guessing. Together, they work the console controls. She initiates the fail-safe sequence. The sphere pulses once, then begins a countdown in an incomprehensible alien script. They sprint for the exit, hearts in their throats. The corridor behind the waterfall is still open, but the door tries to seal itself in reaction to the failsafe. Rael uses every ounce of strength to keep it from closing entirely, while Sarika slips through. She braces the mechanism from the other side, letting him squeeze through. They tumble out onto the slippery rocks, wincing as the door locks behind them. A moment later, from within the vault, a cataclysmic energy surge flares. The entire waterfall glows with intense light, roaring with otherworldly fury. Then it's gone, leaving only the thunder of water and a quake shaking the canyon. They find themselves breathless, bodies soaked from the mist, half collapsed on the wet stones. A faint rumble echoes behind the waterfall, but it quickly recedes. Whatever monstrous power was in that artifact, it's no longer a threat to the galaxy. Rael glances at Sarika, sees relief in her eyes, tempered by sorrow. She reached out and touched something that might have been a legacy for her species. Now it's destroyed, but so many lives might have been saved by that choice. He brushes a strand of silver hair from her cheek, uncertain if she'll accept the gesture. She doesn't pull away. The purring timbre in her throat resonates softly, an acknowledgement of their shared victory. They limp away from the waterfall, making camp in a sheltered alcove. The canyon air is cold, but the adrenaline of their escape lingers. She tends to the burn on her side. He checks his various bruises and cuts. They share the last of the ration bars in silence. The threat of the artifact is gone, but the war that brought them here isn't. He wonders what comes next. She glances at her wrist device, the soul bond indicator. The light is steady, no longer flickering with confusion. She meets his gaze. They don't speak of it, but a quiet resolution forms. They'll face the consequences of this link, whatever it may mean. For now, they're alive. In the days that follow, they navigate back through the canyon, forging a path toward the nearest location, rumored to have a functioning starport. They both know parting ways might be inevitable, or perhaps working together is the better option. Neither is sure. But their alliance is no longer just an alliance. It's something deeper, sealed by shared danger, raw desire, and an unexpected bond that transcends war. Even as they walk side by side, scanning the horizon for signs of trouble, the occasional brush of their arms ignites that same electric tension. Her skin pulses with a gentle glow that mirrors a quiet acceptance. His heart thuds in response. They say nothing, but they both feel it. One morning, not far from the rumored starport, they're ambushed by a small platoon of human troops. Rael instantly recognizes the insignia of the unit that betrayed him all those months ago. Sarika bristles at their aggression. The standoff is tense. The human commander demands Rael's surrender, insisting he's a traitor. Rael stands his ground. Sarika steps beside him, raising her gauntlet. The platoon reacts with hostility, rifles aimed. But Sarika isn't backing down. The memory of her species' war with humans weighs on everyone, but she stands with Rael anyway, making it clear she'll fight anyone who threatens him. The commander sneers at the alien. You've fallen low, siding with this scum. Rael's jaw clenches. Check your facts! I'm no traitor. I was betrayed first. Guns bristle, tension crackles. For a moment, it looks like bloodshed is inevitable. Then Sarika pulses her gauntlet with a brilliant flash, momentarily disorienting the platoon. Rael leaps into action, disarming a couple of soldiers. Sarika stuns 2 more with quick strikes. The rest scramble, unsure how to handle an enemy so fast. In mere moments, the platoon is on its knees, pinned by their own confusion. The commander curses but can't do anything. Rael stands over them, breathing hard, trying to decide if vengeance is worth it. He glances at Sarika. Her eyes are fixed on him, waiting to see his choice. He exhales, stepping back. I'm done with you, he growls, leaving them to struggle on their own. He doesn't bother killing them. Their fate is irrelevant now. They push on, the starport looming ahead. The facility is a patchwork of ships and landing pads guarded by multiple species. Mercenaries and traders mingle, in a tense bustle. Rael and Sarika slip in, ignoring the suspicious glances. They locate a small cruiser for sale, battered but spaceworthy. Pooling their stolen credits and salvage, they manage to buy it. When asked for a destination, they share a look. She quietly suggests a border system, where neither faction holds full control, a place they can regroup. He nods. So they board, the cruiser together. As the engines rumble to life, she takes a seat at the co-pilot station, setting coordinates. Rael grips the controls, heart pounding with the realization of how drastically his life has changed. He left on a path of revenge, ended up with a deadly alien soldier who might, unthinkably, be bound to him by something deeper than war. He sneaks a glance at her. Her hair gleams under the cockpit's lights, her posture vigilant. She senses his gaze, turning with a faint tilt of her lips. The tension that once existed solely on the battlefield now hums in the confined space, an undercurrent that neither denies. As they lift off, the starport shrinks below. The atmosphere thins, giving way to the star-flecked darkness. He navigates a route that avoids major patrols, relying on scraps of intel about local conflicts. She double-checks systems, occasionally flashing him a determined look. They may still be hunted by her faction, or by the humans who branded him. A traitor. Danger lurks at every turn, but for the moment, they're free. Days pass in a blur of starfields and short warp jumps. They talk little, but the silences are not empty. Sometimes he finds her watching him from across the ship's common area, eyes flicking from violet to cyan. The bond is there, undeniable. One evening, as they float in the quiet drift of space, she confronts him. This soul bond indicator. We can't escape it, she says softly. It recognized you. We are connected. Her voice is steadier and basic than before. He considers, then nods. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not running from it either. I've run enough in my life. She studies him, expressions warring across her features. Then she crosses the short distance between them, taking his hand. Her slender fingers interlace with his. They stand in the near dark, the only light coming from the softly pulsing lines on her skin and the faint glow of console indicators. The kiss they share then is gentler than the one in the cave, but no less charged. It speaks of acceptance, of acknowledging that fate, or random chance, threw them together. They still have countless obstacles ahead, but for this moment they allow themselves the comfort of unity. Their hearts beat in tandem, an echo of the synergy they found in battle. When they part, neither one calls it love outright. That word seems too simple for something so primal, so forced by cosmic happenstance. But it's real enough to anchor them. After the moment passes, They quietly separate to prepare for the next warp jump. The borderline system they're aiming for is known for cutthroat politics and perpetual turf wars, but it's the closest thing to neutral territory. They plan to land there, gather resources, maybe form alliances with those who value skill over species. They don't know if they'll be accepted, hated, or hunted, but they do know they'll face it together. The final day of travel sees them passing through a chaotic region of space where drifting wreckage from old battles forms ghostly fields. He navigates carefully. She monitors sensors, scanning for pirates or hostiles. At one point, they pick up a warship signature on the edges of the radar, but it doesn't engage. They slip by unnoticed. Relief washes over them. Soon, the warp gate leading to the border system comes into view, swirling with energy. Rael lines up the approach. Sarika checks the ship's readiness. They glance at each other, hearts pounding, and brace for the final leap. The cruiser plunges into the warp gate, stars stretching into lines of light. A sensation of being pulled through infinite space grips them. Then, just as abruptly, they're spit out near a pale sun. A cluster of stations and ships revolve around a dusty planet below. They've arrived at the threshold of the next chapter in their shared existence. No illusions remain. They're fugitives in many eyes, belonging nowhere. But for a soldier who lost his squad to betrayal and an alien warrior bound by an impossible fate, belonging might be found in each other. They guide the ship toward the largest station orbiting the planet. It's a hodgepodge of different docking, bays, unregistered vessels, and questionable merchants. Perfect for slipping under the radar. As they approach docking procedures, Sarika flicks off her gauntlet's more conspicuous functions, though the soul bond indicator remains faintly lit. Rael wonders if they can hide something so powerful. Perhaps not forever. But it will have to do for now. They pass the checkpoint with minimal scrutiny, paying a bribe to a board official. Then they're inside the station's labyrinth of metal corridors, neon-lit signs advertising black market deals, ship upgrades, mercenary contracts. Even amid the chaos, they keep close, watchful. They rent a small berth for the cruiser and find a modest lodging cluster near the station's core. It's a cramped room, but safe enough to rest. Together, they drop their gear with weary sighs, scanning for hidden bugs or sabotage. Nothing too obvious. She flops onto the bed, an exhalation that's half exhaustion, half tension release. He remains standing for a moment, leaning against the wall, arms folded. Eventually, he joins her. The bed barely accommodates two people, but they manage, limbs tangled. This closeness is no longer foreign to them. She traces a finger over the scar on his cheek. Her eyes flicker with empathy. He runs a hand along her side where the burn wound is healing. They share a moment of peace. Then he says softly, "So what next?" She closes her eyes, inhaling the station's stale air. "We do what we must. Survive. Fight if we have to. Maybe find a place to call ours." He notices she says, "Ours, not mine or yours." A flicker of warmth spreads in his chest. He nods, pressing a light kiss to her forehead. "All right." The hum of the station's engines and the distant clamor of commerce seep through the walls, lulling them. They drift into a dreamless sleep, too tired for watchful shifts. Morning, or whatever passes for morning in this metal habitat, comes with the harsh glare of overhead lights. They rouse, share water from the foif, station's questionable supply, and plan their day. There are matters to attend to, forging new identities, finding work, ensuring no bounty hunters are on their trail. It's a precarious life, but at least they have a direction. She mentions that some enclaves of her people roam the border systems, searching for relics. He suggests they keep a low profile, lest they attract the wrong attention. As they step out onto the station's walkways, crowds swirl around them. Humans, aliens, cyborgs, countless types. No one pays them much heed unless they want to. This place thrives on anonymity. They find a black market tech vendor who modifies Sarika's gauntlet to mask its more obvious signals, making the soul bond indicator appear as a mundane device. Rael picks up supplies for the cruiser, haggling fiercely. Sarika hovers protectively, ensuring no one tries to cheat them. Gradually, They stock up on gear, weapons, and an updated star chart for the region. During a break, they settle in a dark corner of a dingy, tavern-like establishment to eat. The tension never fully leaves Rael. He expects trouble at any moment. Sarika picks up on his unease, leaning in close so her voice won't carry. "We're not at war here," she reminds him. He smirks grimly. "Everyone's at war somewhere. Here, it's just a different battlefield." She nods, acknowledging the truth. They clink metal cups of questionable beverage in a silent toast to survival. The moment is overshadowed by a subtle yearning. Every brush of their arms or graze of their legs under the table stirs memories of that night in the cave, that kiss on the ship. She meets his gaze, eyes flickering from violet to a deep, stormy cyan. By the time they head back to their rented berth, the hush between them resonates. She keys open the door, steps inside. He follows, setting the supplies down. In the cramped interior, they collide in a fierce kiss before the door even closes. It's like they've been holding back all day, both physically and emotionally. She presses him against the wall, hooking a leg around his hip. The purring in her throat returns, that low hum that sets every nerve in him on fire. He answers her urgency with equal force, sliding hands around her waist, pulling her tight. The station's background noise fades away. There's only the frantic beat of their hearts, the flash of her luminescent markings through the parted seams of her armor. They navigate toward the small bed, shedding gear as they go. It's all frantic, raw need. This is not gentle or leisurely. It's the throbbing tension of two warriors who might die tomorrow, determined to seize every breath of life they can. Her lips trace the line of his jaw, traveling to the scar on his cheek. His hands find the clasp of her armor, peeling it aside to reveal the shimmering patterns that shift with her pulse. She shudders at his touch. Their breathing grows ragged. He slides an arm under her to pull her closer. She gasps his name. The dim overhead light flickers, reflecting the primal dance of shadows and glowing skin. Neither of them speaks of love. Their actions speak louder. An explosion of repressed energy they've carried since their fateful meeting on the warship. Afterward, the sweat on their bodies gleams in the faint glow of her bioluminescence. They lie tangled, hearts still thundering, lips swollen from rough kisses. Her head rests on his shoulder, hair splayed like liquid silver. He brushes a thumb across her parted lips. She meets his gaze, no words necessary. The primal edge remains. Even in the afterglow, they're not soft or shy. They're who they are, two lethal beings addicted to danger. It suits them. Eventually, she shifts, biting her lower lip as she regards him. "We can't keep wandering forever," she says quietly. "Someone will find us. Maybe my people. Maybe yours." He nods. "We'll face it, or we run. But we face it together." She exhales, shifting to prop herself on an elbow. "This is soul bond. The old legends say it's irreversible. We can't break it." He smirks faintly, brushing hair from her face. "I'm not sure I want to break it." Her eyes flash with an unreadable emotion. She leans in, pressing her mouth to his, a slow, heated kiss that lingers. The conversation falls away, replaced by the ongoing hum of their connection. Time on the station passes in cycles of pursuit. They do small mercenary jobs, earning enough credits to keep the cruiser maintained. They discover they make an effective team, her infiltration skills, his brute strength, each fueling the other. Whispers of them spread in low circles. A human and an alien, unstoppable in the field, rumored to share a lethal bond. Some are intrigued, some threatened, but no one openly challenges them. The tension of the galaxy's war remains in the backdrop. Yet here, in this lawless zone, they carve out a space for themselves. Occasionally, Sarika picks up transmissions from her people's frequencies. She listens silently, gleaning that a faction of her army is still aggressively hunting defectors, or those rumored to have fraternized with humans. Rael picks up rumors that certain human commands still put a bounty on his head, labeling him rogue. Each rumor tightens the coil of tension. Sooner or later, the fight will come. Until then, they build alliances with a handful of outcasts on the station. A cyborg pilot, a reptilian arms dealer, a disgraced noble from some far-flung monarchy. No real friends, but enough contacts to watch their backs. Despite the constant edge of possible violence, Rael and Sarika share more intimate moments. Sometimes it's a swift, heated joining in the engine room after a successful job, mind still racing with adrenaline. Sometimes it's a quiet meal in the cramped bunk, leaning into each other's warmth. There's little time for tenderness in a place like this, but they create fleeting pockets of it nonetheless. Her soul bond device remains a silent witness, always glowing faintly. As the days stretch into weeks, they form a precarious sort of life together. Eventually, the day arrives when that life is threatened. A rumor surfaces that a high-ranking official from Sarika's homeworld is en route to the station, accompanied by a contingent of elite soldiers. Word is, they're searching for a traitor in possession of sensitive data. Data possibly connected to the artifact fiasco. They want vengeance. The station's underworld buzzes with speculation. Sarika feels an ominous pull. This might be about her, or about them. Shiel suggests leaving immediately, jumping to another system. She hesitates. Running is wise, but she's tired of running. She also knows these officials might be harboring bigger plans, like resurrecting another superweapon. She can't let that happen. He sees the resolve in her expression, sighs, and agrees to stand with her. They hatch a plan. Sabotage the officials' ship so they can't easily escape, then confront them and forcibly obtain any data about the artifact's remnants. It's reckless, but so is every breath they've taken together. The official arrives in a gleaming cruiser, escorted by 2 corvettes. The station watchers quickly relay that the official's party is docking in a restricted bay. Rael and Sarika gather their gear. They share a tense, urgent kiss before heading out, as if it might be their last. Then they melt into the stations and corridors, using service tunnels to reach the docking bay. Sarika's infiltration prowess gets them past several checkpoints. They plant small charges on the corvette's main thrusters, rigging them to short out. One of the station's bored maintenance workers helps for a bribe, turning a blind eye. Moments later, an alarm starts blaring. Soldiers from Sarika's faction swarm the corridors, scanning for intruders. Rael and Sarika press themselves against a bulkhead, hearts pounding. The official, a tall alien with elaborate armor, emerges from the cruiser with an escort of 6 heavily armed guards. Sarika recognizes the insignia, the crest of a warlord rumored to be orchestrating radical agendas. She tenses. Rael cracks his knuckles, adrenaline spiking. They time their attack for the moment the official passes a vulnerable stretch. Sarika leaps from cover, gauntlet blazing. Rael fires a short burst from a salvaged plasma rifle. The corridor explodes in chaos. Soldiers shout, scrambling to return fire. The official's guards form a tight shield wall, advanced barriers shimmering. Sarika ducks behind a crate, launching pulses to test the shields. Rael curses. These are top grade. They'll have to get in close. He tosses a grenade of alien origin that he picked up from a black market vendor. The resulting blast cracks the shield but doesn't drop it fully. The guards hold position, returning deadly accurate shots. Sarika barely avoids a direct hit. She signals to Rael. They split, flanking around the guard formation. One guard peels off to intercept Rael. They clash hand to hand. The corridor, too cramped for extended firefights. Rael blocks a strike from an electrified baton, muscles straining. He counters with a brutal headbutt, staggering the guard. Then a twisting elbow strike crushes the guard's helmet. They collapse. Another guard engages Sarika, who weaves beneath a barrage of laser blasts, then closes the gap, delivering a swift gauntlet strike that short-circuits the guard's armor. She catches a retaliatory blow to her shoulder, but it slides off. Her own armor. She retaliates with a knee to the guard's midsection, finishing with a disabling energy pulse. The official stands at the center, rallying the remaining 4 guards. Rael and Sarika converge in a hail of plasma. The guards struggle to maintain the battered shield. Finally, the shield fizzles. A savage exchange ensues. Sarika downs. One guard with a lightning-quick series of strikes. Rael dispatches another, ignoring a burn wound across his arm. 2 more remain, fighting desperately. Sarika manages to slip behind them, forcing a guard's weapon to misfire into their own ally. The corridor is choked with smoke, sparks flying from damaged systems. At last the official stands alone, breathing hard, armor dented. Sarika aims her gauntlet. "You came for me!" she spits in her own language. The official sneers, voice dripping contempt. "You're a disgrace to your lineage, consorting with humans." A blade snaps out from the official's gauntlet. Rael steps forward, rifle raised. The official feints, launching a hidden projectile that clips Rael's side, drawing blood. Sarika's eyes blaze cyan with fury. She unleashes a relentless series of strikes. The official counters fiercely, but Sarika's speed and skill prove superior. With a final blow, she tears away part of the official's helmet, exposing their face. Rage contorts their features. "Where's the data on the artifact remnants?" she demands. The official curses, refusing to answer. Rael staggers forward, leveling his rifle at the official's chest. "You have 2 seconds to talk." The official's eyes flick between them, calculating. Finally, they give a mocking laugh. "Gone. The last hope for your species' ascension destroyed by your own hand. You're nothing now." Sarika's face hardens. She sees that the official has no intention of sharing intel. The official lunges, desperate for a final blow. She reacts instantly, stepping aside, driving her gauntlet into the official's unprotected flank. A pulse of energy floods their body, short-circuiting nerve impulses. The official collapses, unconscious or worse. Alarm klaxons intensify. They know station security or more reinforcements will arrive soon. They scavenge what they can from the official's armor. No data chips that matter, just cryptic references to extremist plots. Sarika's hands tremble slightly as she pockets the scraps of information. Rael touches her arm gently, ignoring his own bleeding side. "We gotta go," he murmurs. She nods, voice thick with lingering rage. "Let's vanish." They manage to slip away amid the confusion, ducking into maintenance tunnels. The sabotage charges on the corvettes detonate, throwing the bay into chaos. By the time station security organizes, Rael and Sarika are halfway back to their cruiser. Breathless, covered in bruises and fresh wounds, they seal themselves inside. Their ship. Sarika slumps into the co-pilot's seat, exhaling. Rael flips switches, warming the engines. The station's command might be preparing to lock them down, but he's faster. With a roar of thrusters, they blast out of the docking clamp, ignoring frantic transmissions. The battered cruiser surges into open space. A corvette tries to intercept, but sputters from the sabotage. They slip free. In the safety of hyperspace, silence envelops them. The hum of the drive resonates in their bones. Sarika bows her head. He notices the tension in her posture, the conflicting emotions that swirl in her eyes. Gently, he touches her shoulder. "We made it," he says quietly. She lifts her gaze, nods. For now. The war. It's everywhere. They'll come again. He can't argue. Instead, he leans in, pressing a kiss to her temple. The gesture feels natural after all they've endured. She cups his cheek, meeting his eyes. "You're a fool," she murmurs, a faint quirk to her lips. "But so am I." He gives a soft laugh, tension easing just a fraction. "Guess we deserve each other." The jump ends, depositing them in empty space far from prying eyes. He sets the autopilot for a quiet route, letting them catch their breath. She helps patch his side wound. Her tender care contrasts with the fierce way she fought. He hisses when the disinfectant stings. She offers a sardonic half-smile. "You humans bruise easily." He smirks back. "Your concern is touching." They linger in that quiet sector, drifting near an uninhabited planet. For the first time in days, they have a moment to reflect. She pores over the minimal data gleaned from the official, frowning. "Nothing about new superweapons, at least. Maybe we really did destroy the only artifact. They just wanted to punish me. Us." Rael exhales, relief warring with the knowledge that other threats loom. "We'll keep our eyes open. The galaxy won't let us rest for long." Their eyes meet across the cockpit. Tension morphs into something warmer, an understanding that they've chosen each other despite the madness around them. He stands, reaches out a hand. She takes it, rising from her seat. The swirling starlight outside casts their shadows onto the walls. Her luminous markings brighten at his touch. They find themselves locked in another embrace, this time gentler, but no less intense. Their bodies remember the shared battles, the shared bed, lips meet, and for a brief moment, the entire universe narrows to that connection. When the kiss breaks, they remain close, foreheads touching. Her voice is subdued. "Where do we go now?" He studies her features, the swirl of color in her eyes. "Somewhere the war hasn't reached yet, if that even exists. Or maybe we fight on the fringes, picking off threats, I don't know." She nods, letting out a slow breath. "At least we go together." The next day, they scan the star maps for a remote system with minimal activity. A place to hide out, gather resources, and plan their next move. The concept of forging a permanent base tempts them. They've both lived too long in the shadows of conflict. A chance to breathe, maybe even build something lasting, beckons. Yet deep down, they sense that trouble will find them no matter where they go. The days turn into weeks. They settle on the outskirts of a small star cluster, setting down on a barely charted planet with a stable atmosphere, no known inhabitants. The surface is a mix of rocky plains and shimmering lakes. They find a sheltered ravine where the cruiser can rest without attracting attention. Together, they erect a simple camp outside, clearing an area for cooking and storing supplies. The first few nights feel eerily peaceful, no alarms, no gunfire, just the wind across alien grass. Sarika explores the local flora. Some edible plants glow faintly, reminding her of her homeworld. She harvests what she can, her glowing marks mingling with the planet's natural bioluminescence. Rael hunts small creatures for protein, fashioning traps from scraps of metal. They rarely speak of the war, but occasionally news filters through the ship's long-range comm. Battles rage on distant fronts. Their names come up once or twice, on a list of wanted criminals. They turn it off, preferring the quiet. At night, they lie beneath the vast sky. Two battered warriors who found a fragile bond in chaos. Sometimes they share more intense intimacy, driven by that same unstoppable current that first ignited in a corridor of fire. It's no longer purely savage. There's a tenderness that's grown, though the edges remain rough. Each bruise or scar is a testament to survival, each kiss a reminder that they can still feel something more than violence. The soul bond indicator remains, lit, an ever-present symbol of their entwined fates. One afternoon, they discover a small waterfall at the edge of the ravine, reminiscent of the one where they destroyed the artifact. The memory makes them pause. She looks at him with a faint smile, a silent acknowledgement of everything that's happened. They bathe in the crisp water, washing away grime from days of labor. The moment is peaceful until he notices her gaze drifting to the horizon, brow creased with worry. He knows the storm clouds of war will gather again. They can't hide forever. Eventually, they must decide, stay here or step back into the fray. The latter is inevitable, given their natures. They're soldiers at heart, and with the galaxy in turmoil, there's always a cause or a threat that demands their skills. She admits she can't remain idle if her people continue down a path of destruction. He admits he can't ignore the betrayal that turned him rogue. Slowly, they form a plan to do what they do best. Intervene on their own terms, forging alliances with like-minded outcasts, hunting down warlords, turning the tide where possible. They leave their quiet shelter, hearts heavy but resolute. The Zikaiv, bond between them is stronger than ever, fueled by each day of survival, each brush of lips, each shared victory. As they power up the cruiser's engines, Sarika glances at him. "Ready?" He meets her gaze, scars visible in the cockpits. "Glow. Always." The ship lifts off, slicing through the planet's atmosphere. Once more they leap into the stars, forging a path that's neither purely hers nor his, but something new. A final sense of closure settles between them as they set course. No matter the battles ahead, they have each other's backs. Their connection, equal parts ferocity and passion, will carry them through. The soul bond device glows quietly, its shocking revelation now an accepted truth. Their war isn't over, but neither is their impossible romance. The galaxy might burn, but they'll face it together, braced by the knowledge that neither fights alone. If fate decided to make them soulmates, they'll bend that fate to their will, and in the darkness of uncharted stars, they find a fierce, indomitable kind of hope.